Join me by artificial fire as I discuss the book Same as Ever and Morgan Housel. Now, in the book Same as Ever, we can realize that history does not repeat itself. It's human behavior that repeats itself. And by looking at these patterns that always repeat themselves, that are the same as ever, we can predict things and set up stable futures for ourselves, financially and in life. Whoa! There are 3 stories that the book shares to highlight certain tales, certain lessons that we can learn from history. In 1926, Houdini invited a group of people backstage after a showing at a place that I forget. That detail doesn't matter. But he was doing some magic, and he invited a group backstage. And one college kid started punching him in the abdomen. The next morning, he had many pains, and some time later, around 9-ish days, maybe, he died to a ruptured appendix. It's kind of ironic because, he would be buried alive or thrown in a river chained up or all sorts of these dangerous things, but he knew the risks. Houdini would get punched in the gut multiple times, but he had been flexing his abs. He had been prepared. He had been prepared for that and all the other dangerous threats he had. He had been prepared. However, Gordon Whitehead came out of nowhere. It was a thing that wasn't expected. What can we learn from Houdini's death? Well, and I believe the biggest thing we can learn from Houdini's death is the events that we do not expect house the greatest threat. Some examples of this are 9/11, the Lehman Brothers Bank, COVID-19 pandemic. They came out of nowhere. So what can we do to prevent against the unknown, larger threats? In terms of finances, we could build a strong portfolio to prevent against eventual disaster. Everyone says that. Have a strong portfolio. Be diversified in your investments. But what does that really mean? Well, here are 2 things. When you invest, make sure your assets are uncorrelated. What do I mean by this? Well, if I own a bunch of tech, like everything I have is a tech stock, and the industry of microchips or silicon, some big disaster happens, usually the entire industry reflects that. However, if I own some tech, some food, some whatever, utilities or whatever, there's different things, then I'm more protected against overall. And that's why many people invest in index funds, because it has many stocks, all collected, but overall, it usually goes up and is generally considered more safe than individual stocks. And if disaster strikes, you're more safe. Warren Buffett is often criticized for having too much liquid cash. However, he believes and he argues that if disaster were to strike and he were to need to have cash on hand, that is worth more than whatever yield he could have returned with investing that cash, risking that cash. Now it's the whole, should I be secure or should I want more? Typically some people, depends. Some people, they don't have any cash on hand. It's all tied up in stock. It's all in the crypto and investments, real estate, whatever assets. Other people, they don't like stocks. They don't take the risk. They just have their cash. They like it, and it's secure because if something goes awry, boom, money. That's just the debate that some people talk about. It's up to you. Me personally, I believe that some should be invested, some should be saved, and what that ratio is, don't ask me because I'm still figuring it out. While I'm young, I should probably invest a lot more, while I can still take risks and have many, many less utilities and costs. Essentially, what we can learn from Houdini's death is that the biggest risk is unexpected. The biggest threat comes out of nowhere. The next lesson/story we will be discussing is the California super bloom. Record amounts of rain in California were recorded, and much life came out of it. Lots of water, lots of green. It was very beautiful. It was amazing. Until all the excess rain stopped. Then drought, then wildfires. We can take from this too much of anything can be poison. There's a quote, calm plants the seeds of crazy. Jeffrey Bezos. What does this have to do with that? Well, Jeffrey Bezos has this idea of a day one mentality. If we think, it's still a startup. This is day one, we're gonna work. You never get complacent. You never get that pipeline of complacency, decline, stress, failure. Maybe the bald man has some good insights. Maybe the bald man has evil corruption. We must seek a new opportunity before the asset dies. A good example of this is Jerry Seinfeld. He dropped the show while it was still high at its peak. He says the only way to know where the peak is, the top of the hill, is to go through the decline. And Jerry Seinfeld had no interest in that decline. Therefore, he cut his losses and ended while things were still good. He sought a new asset, which was going back to stand-up comedy, what he loved, and he ended his show. Now, another reasoning behind this is that Jerry Seinfeld, he would people watch. That's how he got a lot of his jokes. He would sit in places and watch people and come up with jokes from it. However, and it would be good for the show. However, he became so famous that he could no longer go out in public without being attacked by people. Well, not attacked, but like, oh my gosh, it's Jerry Seinfeld. The next lesson and story. The world's tallest man. He was 6 feet tall at the age of 7. 7 feet tall at the age of 11. And in his adult life, he stood a 9 feet tall. That is huge. Now, for someone so big, you might expect them to be strong. You might expect them to be large. However, this man was ridiculously skinny. This man was ridiculously fragile. In fact, he had to have metal, like, stints so he wouldn't hurt himself. And this has to do with growth. This has to do with the building of things. See, if we think about this, if I'm building a Lego tower of Lego blocks, Lego not sponsored, then I could stack it really, really high, really, really fast. If I just go one piece, 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 one piece. But that's fragile, and I could just push it over, or the wind could just blow it over. However, so therefore, fast growth leads to fragility. What we want is slow, stable growth. Maybe not slow, but we want growth at the right pace. We don't want to go too far forward before we can sustain ourselves. So therefore, we build a foundation. If I build a base, and then add, and then add, and then add, then it is a strong, stable structure. And I could probably punch it, and it'd probably break because I'm very strong. And I am very. If we have a larger and slower time scale, we can get to places that we never expected to get. You know, most people these days, society, they don't have a large time scale. They can't really see a year or even 10 into the future, and that's sad because I think about my future a lot. You know, the future holds great things, and we have to think about the future so we can create a base today. Yes, unrestrained growth leads to fragility. Therefore, in business, life, and finance, grow sustainably. Morgan Housel does not pander to his reader. Morgan Housel writes what he personally finds interesting. This is what he said. And hopes that some people also find it interesting. Now, the thing about his books, you know, Same as Ever is in his first book. He had a wildly successful book, The Psychology of Money. I will be discussing this sometime in the future. However, right now I will be talking about Same as Ever because I read it more recently. What was I going to say? Morgan Housel does not give you advice. He simply states things in his books, and you take advice, you create your own advice. You're kind of guided along. But you take what you need, and it's like a supermarket, you know? You walk through and it's like, oh, there's that story, and there's that story. There's many more stories in Same as Ever. These were just the ones that I found profound and important. There's a story about his friends who died in a skiing accident. And actually, I will talk about that. I'll get to it later. But that was pretty important. What I will say, Housel wants you to be introspective. He doesn't want the book to be the end of the learning. Because when you finish a book, slam, that's usually the end. But Morgan Housel wants it to be the beginning. He wants you to read his book, and he wants your brain to change. He wants you to start your learning. Makes sense? Most people actually don't want to be a millionaire. They want to spend $1 million. They want $1 million house. They want $1 million car. They want to spend materially and have the status of a millionaire. Why? Because materialism. Because society. I will give no further explanation, because you've heard this a million times. Morgan wants to have $1 million cash in the bank. Why? Because it is a stable cushion. $1 million to Morgan is freedom. It is not. The greatest thing about wealth to him is freedom. And personally, I agree. Money is about freedom. It's about being able to have the time to do whatever you want. I wake up, I go to work, or I sleep. I do whatever I want, when I want. And that is a good life. The business, it's a concept of the black hole. There's always work to be done, and you have people that'll just get sucked down it, and they'll constantly be working. I'll probably work more as a business owner than as a worker. But honestly, it depends, if the work is purposeful. Different discussion. Back to topic. You know what they say, live below your means. Rice and beans and rice. That's not from the book. I forget where that's from. Endurance and patience beats the market. If everyone tries to beat the market, and, it's just easier to have endurance and patience. You might beat the market and be up some. However, it's just easier to have the endurance and patience of the market and watch the overall growth of an index fund. It's like 5 a.m. I woke up early. Today's a school day. I have chemistry first block. Having control leads to happiness. Now, if you have more control in your work, then you're more likely to actually love your work. You see stories of artists that love painting or love whatever art thing, whatever, they have a hobby. They love their hobby. However, if they pursue it as a career, they have to do it. It's no longer about once, I'll do it when I have fun, blah, blah, blah. They have to do it. They have less control over it, and it becomes less fun. And some people actually grow to resent that. They grow to resent what they loved. And that's sad. The world is split. There's people that have no clue how to make money or are struggling to make money, and there's people that don't know when to stop making money. You have people that don't know the discipline, the habits, the whatevers, or they don't have the luck to have any resources in that. And there's people that work. They work and they work and they work. And once they get there, they still work. The richest man in the world once said, when asked by a reporter, how much money is enough? He said, more. I don't know exactly the quote. I think it was Andrew Carnegie. You can Google it. But all these people, look at Elon Musk. The man is a multi-billionaire. And he is still stressed the F out. He wakes up, he works. He wakes up, he works. Mark Zuckerberg. If we think about it, the person that sold, I believe it was MySpace. He sold it for like 20 million, And he went, and if you look at his social media, he travels around with his wife. He does nothing. He has control. Mark Zuckerberg, with Facebook, is one of the richest people in the world, multi-billionaire, and he has to show up to court with these privacy issues. There's all this pressure on him. So much stress. These billionaires don't know when to stop making money. They can't stop, because what got them to be a billionaire, they're not just going to turn off. They're going to want to work until they die. These billionaires, they will be like 96 and they will still be at their desk working. That is sad. I'm sure they still have fun. I'm sure they still have giant parties or whatever billionaires do. You know, they probably murder orphan virgin blood in the cult elitist Illuminati or whatever they say. I don't know. That is a conspiracy that I am just saying as a joke. Don't murder me. Okay. So, actually, if you want to have a nice life, you want to be able to develop the skills to develop money, to have money, but you also want to have the skills to realize when